Welcome to Pennsylvania Newsmakers. Well, I think we just had an election, a presidential election, a U.S. Senate and House elections, and in our state, we had some very interesting returns. We'll get to that with a bunch of experts, and we'll do that following these words.
This is Pennsylvania Newsmakers, a fast-paced, unrehearsed weekly discussion with and about the leaders who shape your world. And now, here's your host, Terry Madonna.
Well, we're going to be talking about this election for a long, long time. But first, let's try to figure out what happened on Tuesday, and then moving forward, what is likely to happen now, if anyone can figure this out. Well, joining me first is Dave Taylor. He's the president of the Pennsylvania Manufacturers Association, and Gene Barr. He's the president of the Pennsylvania Chamber of Business and Industry. Two guys that are on the show a good bit. And then afterwards, we'll get the view from academe on what happened on Tuesday. All right, first I want to point out here, I'm holding Gene Barr's book up. We talked about it before. A Civil War captain and his lady. I was running around saying, and the first lady. That wasn't true.
You've been doing way too many presidential talks. Way too many.
And his first lady. But this is well worth reading. Just get on Amazon, Google. I guess Amazon Gene Barr, it would come right up, right?
It should. Yep.
I've read parts of it. It's going to be interesting. All right, how surprised were you? And pick an election that surprised. I'm going to ask the other my colleague.
What surprised me most of all, I mean, I'd be lying if I didn't say that the outcome of the presidential race was really quite stunning. I was not enthusiastic about the GOP nominee, but now we've got to see how he does in office. And I think the early indicator that's most important is to see who he chooses to be his most senior advisors and to be his cabinet officers. As the saying goes, personnel is policy. And if he's able to recruit consequential people who are expert in those fields and to give them the autonomy to function in those areas, then he could govern well. The one name that I heard was Governor Bobby Jindal, former governor of Louisiana, possibly as Secretary of Health and Human Services. Now, Jindal worked there in the Bush 43 administration.
Sure.
If Trump can bring people like that in to serve at the highest levels of government, perhaps he will serve well. We'll find out.
Gene?
No question it was the presidential. I mean, I'll be honest, I did not give, and most people didn't. I shouldn't say most people, because obviously many people were planning on voting for him without telling people like you as pollsters. Very much a surprise. In fact, early on as I was watching the results, I thought Toomey was done because I didn't think Trump was going to win, and Toomey was trailing Trump at certain parts. So I said, well, I'm not sure that this race continue. I agree with Dave. What's key now is we've seen the comments that we've all been so disturbed by in terms of campaign. Can Donald Trump govern? And I said last night to somebody, I'd strongly encourage him to pick up, continuing the Civil War theme, the book on Lincoln's Team of Rivals, because he's got to get over this.
That's a great point.
He has generals who have said Donald Trump doesn't know what he's talking about, basically. He now has to go to some of these people and say, I know you don't like what I said, but I need you to help me keep this world safe, keep this country safe. He's got to put that behind him now and get the best possible people he can, many if not most of whom were not Donald Trump supporters.
Let's move on. We're going, we've got a lot to cover in relatively. I mean, here's what goes on. Trump did not hurt the down ballot tickets. Everybody was, oh my gosh, Trump is going to destroy the legislature. You know, the Democrats are going to pick up seats. Toomey's done. McGinty's going to win. He's obviously the Democratic candidate for the Senate, and he seems to have helped the down ballot ticket in some places, particularly where he did well, so much so that the Pennsylvania legislature, as we speak, when it convenes in new session, will have more what than before?
more Republicans. I mean, the person I think in Pennsylvania who had the very worst night was Governor Wolf. That coming back, he is going to face larger majorities of the party opposite in both the House and the Senate. That the House R's gained 3 seats to go to 121. There are some races still to be finalized. But in the state Senate, the Republicans added 3, going from 31 to 34, which is a 2/3 supermajority. It's going to be very difficult for the governor to advance his preferred agenda. And then beyond that, of course, he lost his close ally in Katie McGinty in the U.S. Senate race. Right. And then beyond that, he will not have a friend in Washington in the incoming presidential administration, where, of course, he was expecting to have Hillary Clinton. So, the person who's really staring down the barrel of the gun is Governor Wolf.
Yeah, now, here's what's weird. Here's what was odd. Or you want to comment on that? Go ahead.
Just that I agree with you. I think that other than the Southeast area, Trump seemed to hurt, or certainly seemed to help, but certainly not hurt any of those. In fact, we now have just one member of the Senate Democrats west of the Susquehanna River, which includes all those areas that many years ago had many more than
legislature.
That. And interestingly, I think the other thing for when you look at Toomey's race, the gun folks pretty much sat on their hands for Toomey because of what he did with Manchin, so therefore he didn't have that assistance and still won. So I would agree, there didn't seem to be, other than Philly certainly in the collar counties, no negative impact from
Well, and I think it's important to note that that Senator Toomey assembled a completely different coalition than Donald Trump did to win Pennsylvania. That in the collar counties, that there were ticket splitters who supported Senator Toomey, and then in the West, in counties where Toomey or where Trump was racking up huge totals, that Toomey was behind him, and so in that way.
But he still did a little better than the reverse in the Philly burbs. I mean, he was also doing. He did enough in the rural counties, which he offset. He being Toomey, and then offset by the ticket splits, right?
But I mean, that's true. But the fact is that I think the most important thing, Pat Toomey is his own man. He won with his own coalition, and he doesn't owe Trump anything.
Yeah, I agree with. All right, we're going to run to a break. When we come back, and yet 3 Democrats won. I got 4 fingers up. 3 Democrats won the 3 very important statewide offices. Figuring that out is another question. We'll try to do that after these words.
This broadcast of Pennsylvania Newsmakers is presented by the Pennsylvania Chamber of Business and Industry, now celebrating 100 years as the statewide voice of business, and by the Pennsylvania State Education Association and Partners for Public Education, bringing the power of a great education to our schools, our students, and our communities. This broadcast of Pennsylvania Newsmakers is brought to you by the Pennsylvania Highway Information Association, the go-to source to learn about transportation projects and issues. Please visit pahighwayinfo.org. And by the Pennsylvania Manufacturers Association. Business in Pennsylvania is our business.
All right, Dave Taylor and Gene Barr join me. They're representatives of the business community. I think that's an accurate statement, isn't it?
Yeah,
they're both. Yeah, Dave
obviously.
goes, of course, obviously. All right. Oddly, Trump wins, Toomey wins statewide, and then 3 Democratic candidates for Attorney General, Auditor General, and State Treasurer win.
Exactly.
Can any of you explain that?
Well,
Gene, I'll let you try first.
Look, it's the second time that happened with row offices, which, of course, in between, we also had the D's sweeping the Supreme Court last year. It's going to be very interesting, at least perhaps all 3 of them, but they certainly have higher aspirations as well for office. I think that was one of the key points in the Attorney General's race. We had endorsed from the Chamber side John Rafferty. That was a close race.
Right. Yeah, it was very close.
Josh Shapiro will be the Attorney General. We've expressed our reservations. He has said he wants to be a very activist Attorney General. So again, as we've noted, we're going to have a much higher level of number of Republicans in both the House and Senate. And it's going to be interesting to see how all that interplay works.
Yeah. Did that surprise you? I mean, imagine the ticket splitting. And we knew it would increase over 2012 because there were lots of things going on, down ballot activity. Did that surprise you that 2 candidates could win? And then you have this amount of ticket splitting, all 3 row offices?
Yeah, it was unexpected. And I mean, part of it may be that the candidates in those races really weren't able to get any publicity, to make the public aware of who they were and what they stood for. I mean, the one person who I think is going to face a real test is Treasurer-elect Torsella,
right.
in that, you know, with Rob McCord having resigned,
right.
The way that the appointed treasurer was abetted Governor Wolf in accessing the Treasury during the budget shutdown.
Right.
That role is really very important, and how Mr. Torsella conducts himself, I think people will be watching that closely.
And he has promised a lot more transparency. Now, on the flip side of this, for Josh Shapiro coming in, I mean, that office has been in turmoil.
Absolutely.
Both when Kathleen Kane was there, and you know, now there's been with Mr. Beamer in there, you know, doing some reform and moving people around, and Shapiro's going to come in, and let's face it, you come in, don't you have the right to pick your own people at the top?
Absolutely, you need to be able to function effectively. And interestingly, I mean, Mr. Shapiro was selected even though his opponent argued that he didn't have any time spent in terms of prosecuting, which was one of the knocks against. She had very little time. Kathleen Kane did. So again, same party.
Yeah.
You might have thought that, you know what, people looked at this, knew Kane was a Democrat, wanted to make sure that there was a change, but they didn't go that way, interestingly enough, and again, kept all 3 row offices as they did the last time.
Yeah, and here's what's also fascinating. All 3 Democrats, Eugene DePasquale, who's not arguably, and I'm not being partisan about this, done a pretty good job.
I would agree.
You know, as,
very well respected.
As Auditor General. And then you got Torsella, who headed the Constitution Center. He's also run for other offices. And now you also have Josh Shapiro. All of them look like they can be future what? You want to finish my sentence? I'll go to you.
That's too far in the future to speculate.
What, that they'll run for another office?
Well, I mean, that has been the tradition in Pennsylvania, that the row offices are a launching pad for other statewide offices. But again, let's let these fellas take the oath before we speculate on what might come next.
I had my phone on and I'm not supposed to do that. Sorry about that. Go ahead, finish your thought.
No, I mean, that really was the fullness of my thought. Like, let's you know, it's a lifetime in politics, what might come 2, 4, or 6 years from now.
Yeah. No, you're right.
The trouble is you have to, I mean, that's certainly part of the discussion. What's the bench for the Ds? What's the bench for the Rs? And we're going to all be talking about that over the next year or two.
And here's what's really fascinating. We're going to have to figure out if what they do is motivated by a desire. I'm not saying they will, to run for a higher office, because it's the bench.
It's
right?
what's going to be speculated. Everyone's going to do it. It'll be the newspapers, and everyone else will be saying you're doing this because you want to run for X.
But 4 years ago, everybody thought that Kathleen Kane was going to rule the world and be our next governor, senator, and monarch. So that didn't come to pass.
Before I let you go, is this going to be a tough year in Pennsylvania with the governor and the Pennsylvania legislature? Very quickly. I mean, there's not going to be an expansive, big spending budget, right?
There's a $2 to $3 billion hole anticipated. They still haven't fixed pensions, and we've talked about it innumerable times, and pensions still aren't fixed. So, yeah, it's going to be a tough year.
Tough, you think the same?
Like Clubber Lang in Rocky III, I predict pain.
Oh, gosh. All right. All right. We'll hear from a couple of academics. They're going to come on, political scientists. We'll get into more about this election review following these words. And I'll hide this.
This broadcast of Pennsylvania Newsmakers is brought to you by the Pennsylvania Credit Union Association. Pennsylvania Credit Unions, where people are worth more than money. To find a credit union that is right for you, check out ibelong.org. And by the Energy Association of Pennsylvania, Pennsylvania's energy information source. This broadcast of Pennsylvania Newsmakers is presented by the Hospital and Health System Association of Pennsylvania, working towards a healthy Pennsylvania, and by the Pennsylvania Coal Alliance, representing companies involved in America's most affordable, reliable energy source. To learn more, visit pacoalalliance.com.
All right, welcome back. Well, now we're going to be joined by some folks from academe. We got two political scientists here. We got Kyle Kopko from Elizabethtown and Berwood Yost from Franklin and Marshall College. All right, same question. I'll start with you. What most surprised you? You're going to say the Trump election?
I think it's that, but also it's the fact that Toomey won, presumably on some of Trump's coattails, but there are some voter differences across the state, and then having all three Democratic statewide row officers elected too. Seeing that split in the tickets, very surprising.
Yeah, and go ahead, Berwood.
Well, of course, you know, nobody saw the Trump victory coming. I think that's where you
Except
start.
maybe some of the Trump's ardent supporters.
The most ardent supporters certainly did. But I think what perhaps surprised me most is if you look at the exit polls, you saw a lot of dislike for both candidates and even the judgments of about both candidates. And I was surprised by how many people were willing to kind of take a flyer and say, look, there are things we don't like about Donald Trump, but we're voting for him anyway because he's the agent of change. And I think we undersold the demand for change, and we also undersold how important economic issues were in this race.
Yeah, despite the fact that in poll after poll they always came out first we did. Now the other thing that struck me was the size and the increase of the white working class voters. These are the people, as Berwood points out, that have felt, you know, they've not recovered from the recession. These are lives that are not going well. Nobody paid attention to them. Trump comes along and at least articulates some things about manufacturing and trade. You can finish that. Do you agree with that?
Yes, and whenever I was last on the program, we were talking about the possibility of this being a realigning type of election. And traditionally, these are the types of voters that you would expect to vote for Democratic candidates who are going to promote more protectionist types of economic policies. But both of, these voters supported both Trump and Toomey. And there was something very fascinating in the exit polls that came out. There were 35% of voters who said that international trade creates U.S. jobs. 53%, the majority, said that it takes away U.S. jobs. So within that category, the folks who say that it takes away U.S. jobs, a majority voted for both Trump and Toomey. Toomey being formerly with the Pennsylvania Club for Growth. This is just mind-boggling that something like this happened.
It is.
Yeah, I mean, couldn't some of it be Berwood, that when you're looking at this, the positions on Toomey in particular are probably not as well known. Remember, who knows about that? And Toomey does do his own thing. I mean, I think, and so you probably.
At the end of the day, though, Republicans came home. I think heading into the election, we thought that the party was fractured and that he was not, in fact, in our own polls, Toomey, but even Trump, had weak support among Republicans and Republican identifiers. That, by the time, you know, according to the exit polls, by election day, those folks had come home and vote. So, you know, I think that's maybe another surprise, how Republicans came back to the ticket, how there was a surge of Republican voters. There's definitely, you know, this issue, this white working class issue. Those people many of them supported Obama in 2008, which makes this even more interesting.
He won the white working class voters in 2000.
That's right.
In 12.
So that, I mean, talk about there's surprises all around. Here's the thing. I think those voters are looking for, they're undoubtedly looking for something related to the economy and the way that government works in their lives. And they're expecting to have that delivered on. And if they don't, that becomes a problem in 2 years.
We're going to run to a break when we get back. How about this? What least surprised these guys? I wonder what that will be. We'll take that up in a minute.
This broadcast of Pennsylvania Newsmakers is brought to you by the Pennsylvania Medical Society. Inspired physicians committed to the good health of Pennsylvanians and the advancement of the practice of medicine. And by the Pennsylvania Healthcare Association, advancing quality, improving lives. This broadcast of Pennsylvania Newsmakers is brought to you by the Pennsylvania Business Council and by the Pennsylvania Business Council Education Foundation.
Welcome back. Well, Kyle Kopko and Berwood Yost, political scientists, are joining me. All right, I started with you first on that. On the most, how about you for least? What least surprised you? That's tough, I know.
It is, because there were so many surprises in this election. I mean, I think we heard throughout the election the importance of white working class voters. They were going to drive this election.
Yeah.
It didn't surprise me the way they voted and how they behaved. I think what might have surprised me is the turnout, the numbers.
Yeah, right.
They were energized,
yeah.
And we knew from the start they were energized. I think they thought they had, or feel like they have someone that speaks for them in Donald Trump. And so that's probably the least surprising.
Great point. Go ahead.
For me, I'd say it's the 16th Congressional District. That's our home congressional district. U.S. Representative Joe Pitts was retiring, so there was an open seat. Christina Hartman and Lloyd Smucker were running for the seat. The DCCC at the 11th hour pumped in millions of dollars into this race. There's a lot of folks in Washington thinking that this could have been a bellwether for House races throughout the country. If you won the 16th Congressional District, maybe Democrats take the House. At the end of the day, Lloyd Smucker wins by 11 points.
Yeah.
It's pretty similar vote
I think that
coalitions.
is one of the things that is also surprising is that, getting back to your first question, I mean, we expected that there would be down ballot chaos as a result of a Trump presidency. That did not materialize.
He didn't damage it.
He did not damage the ticket at all. It gets back to the point I made about Republicans coming home. Not being surprising, but I think Democrats expected a lot of pickups in a lot of places, and they didn't get them.
Yep. All right, we're going to go to this subject as a couple of people here have some interest in polling. I'll ask you first, what happened?
Well, there's a lot of things that could have happened, and I think it's going to be the subject.
Assessing it.
Yes,
we agree.
yeah, that's the thing. So this is going to be the subject of political science research for years and years to come.
Yeah.
We're going to have to sit back very carefully and consider all this. I've heard explanations anywhere from social desirability bias, where some folks didn't want to say that they were voting for Trump, and then they actually did. I'm not sure if that's really a big factor or not. There could also be sampling issues, how much likely voters were weighted, and just not knowing what the X factor was, because Donald Trump is an unprecedented candidate in the modern political era.
So the question is, but although we've had too many elections recently where the polls have been off and not by much. I get, I mean, maybe we could be slightly exaggerating that.
But everyone was wrong this time around. It was Nate Silver, Nate Cohn, everyone.
Well, and also the parties themselves.
Go ahead.
Right.
Look, it's probably not one thing, and I think about this election that caused the polls to have some difficulties. I think it's a number of things. You know, we're working with new ways of doing polling. You know, there's ways of sampling that we're using that are different than in the past. So polling is you know, developing its techniques as we go along, and that's a very public thing. We're going to figure out what happened. I mean, this has happened in previous elections, 36 of 48, where the wrong winners were picked. We're going to study it. We're going to try to figure it out. I suspect in the end we'll be better, we'll be stronger for this. I think it most likely comes down to voter models.
Our good friend Larry Sabato down at UVA went on Fox and issued a public apology and put it out. Go ahead. What do you think?
Well, you know, whenever you do polling or anything like this, there's always going to be some degree of error. We always include a margin of error to some extent, but it is an art form in some ways, because you have to make assumptions about how voters are going to behave.
But you were very kind. I want to thank you for that. Hey, I want to thank you both for coming in for your insights. All right, we'll see you next week for another edition of Pennsylvania Newsmakers, and as always, stay well.